Welcome to Tiny Show and Tell Us, the bonus series where you write in with your favorite science news or factoid and we read your email aloud and then dive deeper. I'm Deboki Chakravarti and I'm here with my co-host Sam Jones.
Last time we talked about woolly mammoth mice and how to best get microplastics out of your water. We have a really cool bonus episode for you today, as usual, and a reminder that we are always looking for you to write into us to be featured in one of these episodes. You can email tinymatters@acs.org, or you can fill out the form that's linked in the episode description. All right, let's hop into it. I can go first this time.
Yeah, do it.
All right, Deboki, this first one is from listener Kyle, who is Team Wasp. Yes.
Okay, finally, Team Wasp is here.
Team Wasp is here. So Kyle wrote in saying, my top defense, this is for Team Wasp, is that wasps are a primary predator for the pests that eat our food. Farmers are starting to use USDA wasps for pesticide-free pest control. Their wings, stingers, and ovipositors are all extremely small for their complexity. And then Kyle added in, other question, could there possibly be more wasp species than beetles just because of how difficult they are to find, differentiate, and study?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I will explain that.
Okay.
The beetle wasp thing that's going on.
Got it.
Okay.
We're going to get the beetle people in on this too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there might be some wasp beetle conflict. I'm like, bring those entomologists in here. Okay. Let's start out with wasps as predators. They will eat flies, aphids, caterpillars, and other insects that eat our food. And bonus, they give the chewed remains to their larvae back in the nest.
Ew.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sweet, but also ew.
Yeah, so sweet, but disgusting.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, biological control, also sometimes just referred to as biocontrol, is pretty cool. Essentially, it just uses the enemies of the thing you want to fend off, like a caterpillar or a fly, to reduce those pests from destroying a plant or spreading disease. I had no idea that the USDA uses wasps, particularly parasitoid wasps, as a form of biological pest control.
Me neither.
Parasitoid wasps lay their eggs on or in the bodies of other arthropods, which eventually killing them.
Oh my God, wasps, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This is why it's so hard to get on board with Team Wasp.
I know, I'm so grateful for protecting our foods, but also that's some alien, like exploding out the body stuff.
For sure.
These wasps have been used to target specific pests, including the emerald ash borer and the spotted wing Drosophila. I didn't know anything really about these, but apparently they're a huge problem. So the emerald ash borer is an invasive wood-boring beetle from Asia, and it's killed tens of millions of ash trees in North America. It'll lay its eggs in the bark crevices of ash trees. The eggs hatch, the larvae burrow into the tree, feeding on it and damaging the tree. And then in terms of the spotted wing Drosophila, it'll feed on ripening fruits, particularly soft ones, which are my favorites, like raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries. And that damages the fruit, but it also can introduce bacteria in the process that can really wreak havoc. Parasitoid wasps released into the environment could help or seem to help and could continue to help controlling these pests, which honestly is a nice alternative to chemical insecticides.
Right.
I'd rather have these wasps laying their eggs in other arthropods than having the stuff that I'm eating sprayed with stuff that's like, we don't know really if this is very good for people.
But again, this is where wasps need to work on their PR because like in the entirety of like what you're describing about these pests, I was like, yeah, that sounds terrible. But nothing about it made me go like, ugh, the way that like wasps laying their eggs in other species does, right?
Right.
But that's okay. Maybe it's good that, it's not out here worrying about what we think about them.
Yeah. They're like, we're just trying to burrow into the bodies of other arthropods.
Yeah, take it up with evolution.
Okay, and then Kyle asked, could there possibly be more wasp species than beetles just because of how difficult they are to find, differentiate, and study? So I was like, wait, what?
Right.
Like, I don't even, what's going on with beetles? What's the deal here? So I had no idea, but of the roughly 1 million insect species on Earth, around 400,000 of them are beetles.
What?
Yeah, compared to an estimated 103,000 wasp species. In both cases, that's a huge number. But like,
right.
What? Like wasps and beetles combined take up like half of the insects on Earth?
That's wild.
Like in terms of species number,
Right.
not necessarily number, but yeah.
Yeah, numbers. But yeah, like I just never realized that beetles have really like spread out that much in their speciation.
Yeah, me either. Okay, so why, you might wonder? Like,
Yeah, that was my next question.
why are there so many? And that is a big question and a debate. So it's really not well understood. You know, they have been on Earth for around 350 million years. That means a lot of time for evolution to do its thing, for there to be a lot of genetic adaptation to different environments, to different food sources. But wasps are also really old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're estimated to be around 250 million years old. But Kyle may be onto something. So beetles can look so different from each other. And by eye, wasps do look more similar. So this is me just like out of curiosity saying to myself,
Right. Yeah. You're not saying that this is what it is, but
yeah, so like I'm wondering if it's harder to not only find but identify different species of wasps.
for sure.
And there are researchers who have come out and said, you know, we actually think there are more wasp species out there, and in total, more than there are beetle species.
Right. Huh.
So I came across an article from 2020 in NPR where they interviewed an entomologist named Lynn Kimsey at the University of California, Davis. And Lynn studies tons of different insects in different environments and said that in each environment, there were more parasitic wasps than beetles.
Huh.
And so there's a quote from her saying, you have to figure that for every species of beetle, there are at least one or two wasp parasites or parasitoids,
Wow.
which would mean that there are maybe 400,000 wasp species as well, or double that, which is like
Right.
unbelievable. So anyways, this was really interesting. I had no idea. I knew from when you talked about wasps that there were tons of wasp species.
Right.
Did not know that about beetles and did not know there was this debate.
Yeah.
So this was just fascinating. I think this was a good Justice for Wasps plug, for sure.
Yeah.
But I agree. Their PR could be better.
I wonder if we're ever really going to get a good answer, though, because like a lot of like, I mean, obviously for a long time, we just were describing species based on how they look, because that's like the most obvious information.
Right.
And we were using that to set up all these taxonomies and everything. And then eventually we were able to like actually get DNA and start to differentiate better. And like, there must be someone out there. If you're the entomologist like out there who's collecting DNA from wasps in the environment to figure out how many species there are, like, let us know, because I want to know what your work is like.
Yeah.
Because it sounds terrible, but it must also be really fascinating.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I learned a lot. I'm still thinking about the wasps.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep returning to wasps throughout this. I can feel it. But I'm going to take us on a different journey now. So this is from listener Robert, who wrote, the oxidation state of iron held in hemoglobin changes, which causes the hemoglobin to take in the iron or to expel the iron atoms when blood gets to their destination cells in the body. So this was interesting, but also a bit of a challenge. I wasn't sure if I completely understood this correctly. So Robert, if you want to like write in and clarify, or if other listeners want to clarify too, I'm not entirely sure about the part where iron is getting expelled when blood gets to their destination cells, if it's supposed to be iron or oxygen, but we're going to talk about it because there's still like a lot that's really interesting about this.
Yeah.
So let's start with the oxidation state. Sam, I don't know if you're like me, I don't remember all of my chemistry vocabulary, but the way that I understand oxidation state is that it's like how you describe like kind of like a charge of an atom when it's bound to other atoms. So when atoms bind to each other, they're, you know, very loosely, I'm speaking very generally here, they're kind of sharing electrons, like that's how they're stabilizing, right? And so how they share those electrons can vary, and like some will take the electrons more than the other one. Like they're not always like a very equal kind of sharing.
Right.
So depending on what elements you've got bound to each other, one might be sharing the electrons more than the other. And so there's this sort of like charge-like thing that we call the oxidation state.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've established that, let's move on to hemoglobin. Human red blood cells contain hemoglobin, which are made up of 4 subunits, each of which has an iron at the center of it. And each of those subunits will bind to one oxygen molecule. So the job of hemoglobin is to move oxygen around the body so it can get to the cells that need it, and also to take away carbon dioxide. And a detail that was really interesting to me is that oxygen doesn't actually really bind that well to the system, which actually makes sense when you think about it, because you don't want oxygen to bind super well because you actually need it to unbind from these subunits when it gets delivered, right?
Right.
So this is why something like carbon monoxide is so toxic, because it can bind more strongly to those subunits.
Right. And then your cells are not recognizing that that's not oxygen, that's carbon monoxide, and then you're suffocating, essentially.
Yep, exactly. So from what I understand, when there is no oxygen, iron is in the +2 oxidation state. And then when oxygen binds to iron, it shifts to the +3 state. And then when the oxygen gets released, iron goes back down to the +2 state. And so that's, again, because of like the relationship between the iron and the oxygen and how they're like orbitals and everything are interacting and how that's like shaping the way the electrons get shared between them. So like I said, I was looking into what Robert mentioned about how this relates to iron atoms getting expelled when blood gets to its destination cells in the body, and I couldn't find that specifically. But in the process, I did learn more about iron recycling, which was fascinating. So our red blood cells, they age, they get damaged, and so eventually they're taken out of circulation. In one paper I read, they estimated that over 60 years of our life, we'll have around 400 kilograms of naturally aged red blood cells removed from our body.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. It makes sense. It's like 60 years. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's still a lot.
Yeah.
Also, apparently over 120 days, red blood cells in a human will travel around 500 kilometers through our blood, which is crazy. I don't know if that changes with age or the size of the person, but that was just like a wild estimate to me. So when red blood cells get old, they will lose elasticity, they'll shrink, and, this is the result of a number of things like oxidative stress, ATP gets deleted. So yeah, at that point, the cells will get like sequestered and the body will get rid of them. There's a lot about this process that we don't know, but it's done by macrophages in our body. But of course, there's all that iron in the red blood cells. And this paper had an estimate that we need around 2 × 10 to the 15th iron atoms every second.
Wow.
Which is a lot of atoms. And apparently that amounts to 25 milligrams of iron each day.
Okay.
But as anyone who has suffered from anemia knows, it can be hard to get iron. So mammalian bodies have a way to recycle it from red blood cells that are getting discarded. And this can apparently meet around 90% of our need for iron.
Oh.
And so, yeah, as part of that process, we recycle the iron, it makes sense, but it's really interesting that we need to get this atom back.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
I was trying to figure out if maybe there's a way that the oxidation state of iron relates to this, and maybe it does. Like maybe it's easier to remove in that lower oxidation state. I'm not really sure. So yeah, if anyone wants to help me out or like let me know if I went down the wrong path, let me know. But I just thought the iron recycling was really neat.
Yeah, that is really interesting because I feel like you don't hear about that. It's just like you need to get iron from your diet.
Right. Yeah. And you still do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's an important process.
Right. Like we have this built-in resource as well that I didn't know about.
Yep.
Huh. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. And thank you to Boki.
Yeah. Thanks to Kyle and Robert for submitting to Tiny Show and Tell Us, a bonus episode from Tiny Matters created by the American Chemical Society and produced by Multitude.
You can send us an email to be featured in a future Tiny Show and Tell Us episode at tinymatters@acs.org. Or you can fill out the form that's linked in the episode description. We'll see you next time.